Hello! How you doing? Thanks for stopping by. I hope this week's topic is going to be of great interest to you. I began reading this book the other day after reading an article just before the beginning of the Football World Cup about an incredible explorer of the North American continent, but one that hardly anybody has ever heard about. And it's an incredible story of survival, of adventure, of resilience, cooperation, surviving against all the odds. But it has a very unusual protagonist, somebody that history basically forgot about, because often history is written by the winners, right? And this guy was not one of the winners. He was not a Spanish nobleman. He was not a conquistador. He was a North African slave. So here's a little bit of background for you. In 1526, Charles V of Spain commissioned the Spanish conquistador Pánfilo de Narváez to explore, conquer, and settle the territory known then as La Florida. The expedition was a complete disaster, and of the 600 soldiers and colonists that sailed out there, only 4 people survived. 3 of them were Spanish noblemen, and 1 of them was a slave. The slave, Estevanico, or Estevanico, as is often pronounced in North America, he became instrumental in the survival of the group. And they travelled for 8 years and thousands of kilometres all across North America, in what is nowadays the south of the United States and the north of Mexico. One of the other survivors, Álvar Núñez Cabeza de Vaca, wrote a famous book of his memoirs called La Relación, the account. And this became the de facto story of this incredible adventure. However, despite the incredible and really important contributions made by Estevanico, he hardly appears in the book. The North African slave didn't quite fit into the narrative. Luckily, nowadays historians are beginning to recuperate this story, and we're beginning to find out more and more about who Estevanico was. Let's find out more.
So imagine this, right? Millions of soccer fans are just effortlessly bouncing between Los Angeles, Dallas, and Mexico City for the 2026 World Cup. You hop on a plane, maybe watch a movie, and boom, you're there.
Yeah, it's just a few hours of air travel today.
Exactly. But imagine making that exact same journey across those exact same lands, but like 500 years ago. I mean, no highways, no digital maps, just walking.
The contrast is honestly staggering. Because in the 1520s, crossing that territory wasn't a vacation. It was this unfathomably complex, really brutal fight for survival in a totally unknown landscape.
Okay, let's unpack this, because our deep dive today explores this stack of historical journals, Spanish expedition logs, and Layla Lalami's modern research. We're getting into the totally overlooked story of a man who actually made that near-impossible trek.
Yeah, Estevanico, the first African explorer of North America.
Right. But to understand how he even arrived in North America, we really have to trace this chain of absolute disasters.
Oh, definitely. I mean, he was born in Morocco in the early 16th century. Historians actually believe his original name was Mustafa Azamori, but he was sold into slavery to a Spanish nobleman.
Wait, so if he was an enslaved Muslim from Morocco, how does he end up on a Catholic Spanish expedition to Florida? That just, well, it doesn't add up.
Right, so Spain legally barred non-Catholics from the New World at the time. His enslaver essentially forced him to undergo a baptism just to exploit a legal loophole.
Oh, wow. So it's just technicality.
Exactly. So by 1527, he's dragged onto the Narváez expedition, which was entirely about looking for wealth.
And it's an expedition that just failed spectacularly. I mean, they lost their ships, they ran out of supplies, faced starvation. Out of hundreds of men, only 4 survived. Estevanico, his enslaver, and 2 other Spaniards.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how this completely flips the traditional narrative of European conquerors on its head.
Because the power dynamics totally change.
Exactly. The entire master-slave dynamic just collapses in the wilderness. Suddenly, this Spanish nobleman's survival is entirely dependent on the ingenuity of the man he enslaved.
Because Estevanico wasn't just, trailing behind them carrying bags. He essentially became this indispensable local fixer, or like a universal translator.
He really did. He had to walk ahead into totally unknown territory. He's deciphering the cultural protocols of various indigenous groups on the fly, negotiating peace before the armed, desperate Spaniards even showed up.
Which is wild, and the mechanism of how they survived is incredible, because they spent 8 long years walking across what is now the southern U.S. and northern Mexico.
8 years. And they didn't survive by force. Because of his communication skills, they survived by becoming guests. They actually earned a reputation as healers.
Okay, but how do 4 starving foreigners convince local populations that they suddenly have medical powers?
Well, it was this brilliant cultural synthesis. Estevanico and the Spaniards basically combined Catholic practices, like making the sign of the cross, with indigenous healing rituals they observed.
Like blowing on the sick.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They created a hybrid practice that resonated deeply with the local communities, and that's what earned them food and safe passage.
Hold on, though. One of those other survivors, Cabeza de Vaca, relies on this guy to negotiate his survival for 8 years, then turns around and writes that best-selling survival memoir, La Relación.
Right, the famous account.
Yeah, but he basically deletes Estevanico from the narrative. So what does this all mean for how we trust historical records if the group's most vital negotiator was just written out of the story?
It really exposes exactly who held the pen in history. I mean, the Spanish nobleman wrote official records for the King of Spain to secure future wealth and status.
Right, and enslaved Africans' genius just didn't fit their brand of Spanish resilience.
Exactly. And that's why modern voices, like Leila Lalami's fictional memoir, The Moor's Account, are so vital today. They force us to look at the massive blind spots in our primary sources.
Now, you would assume after 8 years of walking across deserts, the guy would just want to finally rest. But here's where it gets really interesting, because his journey wasn't over.
Far from it. They reached Mexico in 1536, but just a few years later, in 1539, Estevanico was sent back out.
Wait, really?
Yeah, leading a new expedition north to search for the legendary 7 cities of gold.
So he's navigating regions that are now present-day Arizona and New Mexico, centuries before Lewis and Clark are even born. The sheer scale of that travel is mind-blowing.
It is. He was navigating this vast, complex network of indigenous trade routes, truly acting as one of the continent's greatest explorers.
But it didn't end well for him, did it?
No, his life ended violently. After he arrived at the Zuni settlement of Hauku, there was a breakdown in those very cultural protocols he usually mastered, which unfortunately led to a fatal disagreement.
A tragic end to a life that shaped the very geography we take for granted. But his story really reminds you that the North American continent you live in or travel through has always been defined by movement, right?
Absolutely, by movement, cultural exchange, and human encounters against all odds. His legacy proves that the map of early exploration wasn't just drawn by European leaders.
Yeah, it was forged by the resilience of Africans, indigenous peoples, and countless others whose brilliance was deliberately obscured.
Definitely.
So, next time you effortlessly cross this continent, think about that 8-year walk. And ask yourself this. If a figure as vital as Estevanico is relegated to the margins of his own expedition's journal, how many other foundational voices are still waiting to be rediscovered in the footnotes of someone else's story?
So, let's chat about those ideas. And don't forget to write down your ideas and your opinions and send them to me so that I can give you some great feedback. Number 1, describe the picture of the book. It has never been translated to Spanish. Why do you think that is so? Number 2, have you ever been to any country in North America? If so, describe your trips. If not, would you like to? Number 3, what historical figures from North American history do you know about? Describe their influence. Number 4, is it true to say that history is written by the winners? Can other versions be revived to counteract this? 5. Do you think that international events, such as the Football World Cup, can bring people together and help us understand different cultures? Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day. See you next time.